Today we're diving into the most feared players to ever play in the NBA, starting off with none other than Vernon Maxwell. Vernon Maxwell wasn't just a streak scorer, he was a live wire. On the 6th of February, 1995, Houston versus Portland, Maxwell sprinted into the stands mid-game and punched a heckling fan in the face. The NBA suspended him 10 games and fined him $20,000. Maxwell later revealed the fan had taunted him about the death of his infant child. It was too much. He lost control. That single moment cemented his Mad Max reputation, but it wasn't an isolated meltdown. Maxwell was constantly on the edge. He once threw a punch at Gary Payton. He got into fights with teammates during practices, and his ejections and technicals piled up at a legendary rate, turning him into one of the league's most unpredictable personalities. On the court, he was unpredictable. Some nights, he'd explode for 50 points and lock up opposing guards. Other nights, his temper would take over, and fans, refs, or opponents became the target of his fury. In Houston, he played a key role in the Rockets' 1994 championship run. He scored 30-inch a pivotal playoff game against Phoenix and hit dagger shots that silenced opposing arenas. But even as a champion, his reputation followed him everywhere. Coaches admitted they were never sure if they'd get the fiery competitor, or the man ready to combust at the slightest spark. Teammates described him as loyal, but dangerous, someone you wanted on your side, because if things got ugly, he wasn't backing down. And opponents knew it. Defenders feared he could torch them from deep, but more importantly, they knew if they disrespected him, the game might not finish the same way it started. That's what made Vernon Maxwell feared. Not just his scoring, not just his toughness, but the reality that he was a storm waiting to hit, a man whose intensity could never truly be contained. But as wild as Maxwell was, the league had never seen chaos like Ron Artest. Ron Artest. Before he became Meta World Peace, Ron Artest was chaos in sneakers. On the 19th of November, 2004, at the Palace of Auburn Hills, he started the darkest night in NBA history. After a hard foul escalated into a scuffle, Artest lay down on the scorer's table. When a fan threw a drink, he snapped, charging into the stands and throwing punches. The malice at the Palace became infamous. The NBA world was stunned as players fought with fans, security, and even arena staff. Artest was suspended the rest of the season, 73 regular games and 13 playoff games, the longest suspension for an on-court incident in league history. But that wasn't the only time Artest lost control. Years later, in April 2012, he struck again. After dunking on Oklahoma City, Artest pounded his chest, then spun, and caught James Harden in the head with a violent elbow. Harden collapsed to the floor with a concussion. Artest got another 7-game suspension, and even before those moments, his reputation was out of control. He admitted that back in his Chicago days, he would drink Hennessy at halftime. He once applied for a job at Circuit City during his rookie season, just to get the employee discount. Nobody ever knew what was coming next. But here's the thing, Artest wasn't just feared for his meltdowns. He was one of the most physical defenders of his era. In 2004, he won Defensive Player of the Year, harassing scorers with a mix of strength, quickness, and intimidation. He'd grab, bump, and talk trash until opponents cracked. Kobe Bryant once said, Artest was the toughest defender he ever faced. That unpredictability, paired with his elite defense, made him terrifying. You weren't just guarding Ron Artest the player. You were stepping onto the floor with a human powder keg. 1 second he was locking you up. The next, he might lose his mind entirely. But if Artest was unpredictable, Kermit Washington showed how one split-second punch could change NBA history forever. Kermit Washington, the 9th of December, 1977, Lakers versus Rockets. A scuffle broke out near midcourt. Players shoved and grabbed. And in the chaos, Kermit Washington turned and landed the most infamous punch in NBA history. His right hand smashed Rudy Tomjanovich's face, fracturing his skull, shattering bones, and nearly ending his life. Doctors said the impact was like a 50 miles per hour car crash. Blood poured onto the court. Tomjanovich needed emergency surgery and months of recovery. It was so bad, the doctor said when he looked inside Rudy's skull. His brain was literally leaking cerebral fluid. The NBA suspended Washington 26 games, then the second longest suspension ever. And the punch changed everything. The league immediately cracked down on fighting, and bench-clearing brawls became automatic suspensions. But what made this scarier was the aftermath. Teammates recalled the silence in the arena, thousands of fans watching in horror as Rudy was carried off. Players admitted they had never seen so much blood spill on a court. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar later said he thought Rudy might die right there on the floor. For Kermit, that 1 second defined his entire career. He was never able to escape the shadow of that punch. Even decades later, interviews and documentaries always circled back to that night. Opponents and fans alike looked at him differently, as the man who almost killed another player with one swing. Even his later charity work and NBA involvement couldn't erase the stigma. For Rudy, it nearly ended his life, but he fought back, returning to play just 5 months later, and later became a championship-winning coach with the Houston Rockets. His resilience turned tragedy into triumph, while Kermit's reputation never recovered. And for the NBA, it changed the rules forever. From that moment on, everyone knew fighting in basketball wasn't just about toughness. It could be deadly. But a few decades later, Latrell Sprewell proved fear didn't always come from violence in a game. Sometimes, it came from turning on your own coach. The 1st of December, 1997. Warriors practice. Coach P.J. Carlesimo told Latrell Sprewell to put a little mustard on his passes. Sprewell snapped. He grabbed his coach by the throat and choked him. Teammates rushed to pull him away, but the story didn't end there. 20 minutes later, Sprewell came back onto the floor and punched Carlesimo in the face. The Warriors voided his $23 million contract on the spot, and the NBA lowered the hammer, suspending him for the rest of the season. 68 games, one of the harshest punishments in league history. The entire sports world was stunned. It wasn't a fight with an opponent. It wasn't trash talk gone wrong. This was a player physically attacking his own head coach. News outlets tore him apart. Sponsors backed away. Even other players admitted they couldn't believe what they were hearing. It became one of the defining scandals of the late 92nd. A cautionary tale about temper and control. What made Sprewell feared wasn't just the act itself, it was what it symbolized.
I wasn't choking PJ. PJ, he could breathe. It's not like he was losing air or anything like that.
If he could choke his coach, what else was he capable of? And yet, Sprewell found redemption. In 1999, the Knicks took a gamble on him. He stormed back onto the scene, helping lead New York all the way to the NBA Finals. Madison Square Garden embraced him. Fans cheered his fire, his scoring, his swagger. But that reputation of unpredictability never left. Even years later, fans didn't just see Sprewell the scorer. They saw the man who once attacked his own coach. And when he later turned down a $21 million extension in Minnesota, telling reporters, "I have a family to feed," it only cemented his polarizing image. That made him unforgettable, both as a talent and as one of the NBA's scariest wildcards. And yet, there was another type of fear. Not wild, not sudden, but slow, bruising, and relentless. Zach Randolph embodied it better than anyone. Z-Bo, toughness wasn't just basketball. It was survival. In Portland, he was part of the infamous Jailblazers era, a roster known more for arrests than wins. He got into practice fights, and once broke teammate Ruben Patterson's eye socket with a punch. Police blotters and headlines followed that team more than box scores. Randolph's reputation stuck with him. In 2009, as a Clipper, he was ejected for punching Louis Amundsen in the face. He earned a 2-game suspension. It wasn't the first time he threw hands, and it wouldn't be the last. In 2014, during the playoffs, he struck Steven Adams in the jaw. The league suspended him for Game 7. Without him, Memphis lost the series. It was the perfect snapshot of who Z-Bo was. Dominant on the block, but always one scuffle away from chaos. Off the court, his name still carried weight. In 2017, he was arrested in Los Angeles, initially on charges of marijuana possession with intent to distribute. The charges were later reduced, but headlines painted him as more than just an NBA star. Opponents knew the rumors, and they knew his edge was more than an act. But in Memphis, that same edge turned him into a legend. He embodied grit and grind. He wasn't flashy, He wasn't high-flying, but he made the paint a war zone. Every possession felt like a street fight. And when it mattered most, Z-Bo delivered. In 2011, he led Memphis to their first-ever playoff series win, dominating the Spurs with 31 points in the closeout Game 6. It cemented his place as the heartbeat of the franchise. Fans loved him for it. Opponents, they knew better than to test him. Z-Bo wasn't feared because of highlights. He was feared because if the game got ugly, he was ready to go there. And more often than not, he'd win. From violent brawls to punches that reshaped league history, these weren't just hoopers. They were players the NBA truly feared. But I want to know what you think. Who was the scariest presence ever? Drop your answer in the comments. Subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you in the next one.